The clock on the wall showed 10:47 p.m. when Minjun Park pushed his cleaning cart through the empty hallway of Westbridge University's mathematics building. His footsteps echoed in the silence. Everyone had gone home hours ago. The professors, the students, the office workers, they all lived different lives from his. They came when the sun was up and left before dark. Minjun came when they left and worked through the night. He was 45 years old now. His black hair had streaks of gray at the sides. His hands were rough from years of cleaning. His back hurt most days from bending and lifting, but he never complained. This job put food on the table. It paid the rent for his small apartment. It gave his wife Sujin a steady life in America. Minjun stopped at classroom 301 and unlocked the door. The room smelled like chalk dust and old books. Rows of desks faced a large blackboard at the front. The board was covered with numbers and symbols. Equations filled every inch of space. He recognized some of them. Calculus, differential equations, things he once understood deeply. He pulled out his spray bottle and cloth. But before cleaning, he did what he always did. He read the board. His eyes moved across the symbols like someone reading a favorite story. He saw where a student had made a small mistake in the third line. He saw where the professor had written a hint in the corner. He saw the beauty in the mathematics. 23 years ago, Minjun had been a student himself. Not here in America, but in Seoul, South Korea. He had been the best math student in his high school. His teachers said he had a gift. They said he could become a great mathematician. When he solved problems, time disappeared. The world faded away. Only the numbers remained. He got accepted to Seoul National University. His parents were so proud. His father worked in a factory. His mother cleaned houses. They had saved every penny to send him to college. Minjun studied hard. He loved every minute of it. Mathematics made sense to him in a way that nothing else did. But then his father got sick. Cancer. The medical bills piled up. His mother could not work enough to pay for everything. Minjun was only 19 years old, halfway through his second year of university. He had to make a choice. Continue his education or help his family. He chose his family. Minjun dropped out of school. He worked 3 jobs to pay the medical bills. His father fought for 2 years but eventually died. After the funeral, Minjun felt lost. He was 21 and had no degree. His dreams of becoming a mathematician were gone. South Korea had moved on without him. He met Sujin a year later. She was kind and patient. She believed in him when he did not believe in himself. They married and decided to move to America for a fresh start. They thought maybe in a new country he could go back to school. Maybe he could finish his degree. But America was harder than they expected. Minjun's English was poor. His unfinished degree meant nothing here. He needed money immediately. He took the first job he could find, cleaning office buildings at night. Then he found this job at the university. At least he would be near mathematics again, even if he could not study it. That was 20 years ago. Minjun wiped the blackboard clean now. The equations disappeared under his cloth. He felt a small sadness each time he erased them. It felt like erasing a part of himself. But this was his job. He moved to the next classroom. Room after room he cleaned. He emptied trash cans full of crumpled paper covered in failed attempts at problem solving. He swept floors. He wiped down desks where students had carved their initials into the wood. He worked steadily through the building. At midnight he reached the 4th floor. This was where the professors had their offices. Most doors were locked and dark. But one office at the end of the hall still had light coming from under the door. Minjun knew that office well. It belonged to Professor David Chen. Professor Chen was one of the few people who stayed late like Minjun. He was maybe 50 years old with gray hair and glasses. He always wore sweaters with elbow patches. He was famous in the mathematics world. Minjun had looked him up online once. Professor Chen had written many important papers. He had won awards. Students competed to study with him. Sometimes when Minjun cleaned near his office, Professor Chen would nod at him or say a quick hello. Nothing more. They lived in different worlds. Professor Chen probably did not even know Minjun's name. Minjun knocked softly on the door. No answer. He knocked again. Still nothing. He pulled out his master key and opened the door slowly. The office was empty. Professor Chen must have left and forgotten to turn off the light. The office was messy in the way that smart people's offices are messy. Books were stacked everywhere. Papers covered the desk. 3 coffee mugs sat in various spots, all half full. The walls had mathematical posters and photos of Professor Chen with other famous mathematicians. But what caught Minjun's attention was the blackboard on the wall. It was a large board, maybe 6 feet wide, and it was covered with a single problem. Minjun stepped closer. His heart beat faster. He forgot about cleaning. He forgot about everything except the symbols in front of him. The problem was a differential equation. It dealt with fluid dynamics, how liquids move and flow. Minjun could see it was extremely difficult, the kind of problem that takes months or years to solve. At the top, in Professor Chen's handwriting, were the words, "Unsolved, 20 years, 20 years." This problem had been waiting for a solution for 20 years. Minjun stood frozen. His mind began working automatically. He saw patterns in the equation. He saw where others had probably tried and failed. He saw a possible approach that might work. His fingers itched to pick up the chalk and start writing, but he stopped himself. He was a janitor. This was not his place. These were not his problems to solve. He had given up that life long ago. He needed to clean the office and move on. Minjun forced himself to look away from the board. He emptied the trash can. He wiped down the desk, moving the papers carefully so he would not disturb Professor Chen's organization. He swept the floor. He did his job, but as he left the office and closed the door behind him, his mind kept returning to that equation. He could not stop thinking about it. The problem followed him through the rest of his shift. It was still in his head when he walked to the bus stop at 6 a.m. It stayed with him on the ride home. When he got to his small apartment, Sujin was already awake. She worked as a seamstress during the day. She had breakfast ready, rice, soup, and kimchi. "How was work?" she asked in Korean. "The same," Minjun said, but it was not the same. Something had changed. He had seen a problem that called to him, a problem that made him remember who he used to be. He ate breakfast and went to bed, but sleep did not come easily. Behind his closed eyes, he saw numbers and symbols. He saw the equation from Professor Chen's board. His mind worked on it without his permission. Minjun had tried for 20 years to forget his old dreams. He had tried to accept his life as it was. But some dreams do not die easily. Some dreams wait patiently in the dark, ready to wake up when given the smallest chance. That equation was his chance. He knew it somehow, and he knew he would not be able to ignore it. The mathematician inside him, the part he thought was dead, was stirring back to life. Professor David Chen stood in front of his graduate students. It was Tuesday afternoon, and 5 students sat around the seminar table. They were the best mathematics students at Westbridge University. They had come from around the world to study with him. "This problem," Professor Chen said, pointing to his office blackboard, "has a history." The students leaned forward. They had all seen the equation before. It hung on the wall like a ghost. Every student who entered Professor Chen's office noticed it. Some had tried to solve it. All had failed. 23 years ago, Professor Chen continued, my mentor, Professor Richard Walsh, first encountered this equation. He was studying fluid dynamics, specifically, how certain liquids behave under pressure in zero gravity. NASA had asked for his help with a space station project. Professor Chen walked to the board. His fingers traced the symbols lovingly, like touching an old photograph. Professor Walsh was brilliant. He had solved problems that stumped everyone else, but this one defeated him. He worked on it for 3 years. He published 2 papers about his attempts. But he never found the complete solution. "What happened to him?" asked Jiwon, a student from South Korea. "He passed away 17 years ago. Heart attack. He was only 59. Professor Chen's voice grew quiet. "The night before he died, he called me. He said, 'David, promise me you'll keep working on it.' The answer is there. We just can't see it yet." The room fell silent. Mathematics was not usually emotional. It was about logic and proof. But this problem carried the weight of a promise, of a teacher's dying wish. "I've kept that promise," Professor Chen said. "I've worked on this problem on and off for 2 decades. Other mathematicians have tried too. We've made progress. We understand parts of it. But the complete solution remains hidden." He turned back to face his students. "I'm telling you this because I want you to understand something important. Mathematics is not always about being the smartest person in the room. Sometimes it's about patience, about refusing to give up, about honoring those who came before us. After the seminar ended, the students left. Professor Chen sat alone in his office. He stared at the equation. He had stared at it so many times over the years. Sometimes he dreamed about it. He would wake up at 3 a.m. with ideas, rush to his desk and try new approaches. Nothing worked. The problem was about fluid dynamics, but it was really about patterns. How do you predict something that seems random? How do you find order in chaos? The equation described the behavior of a special type of liquid under very specific conditions. If someone could solve it, the applications would be enormous. Better spacecraft design, improved medical equipment, new understanding of how the universe worked at a fundamental level. But the math was incredibly complex. It required techniques from multiple fields: calculus, topology, differential geometry. Each part alone was difficult. Together they created something almost impossible. Professor Chen had tried everything. He had collaborated with other professors. He had hired graduate students to focus on specific parts. He had used computers to run simulations. Each approach revealed a little more, but never enough. Sometimes he wondered if his mentor had been wrong. Maybe there was no solution. Maybe some problems were meant to remain unsolved. But he could not accept that. Mathematics was built on the belief that every real problem had an answer. You just had to find the right way to look at it. While Professor Chen sat in his office thinking about the past, Min-jun was at home, unable to sleep. He had worked his night shift and come home at dawn. He should be tired. His body was exhausted, but his mind would not rest. The equation played in his head like a song he could not stop hearing. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Sujin slept beside him, breathing softly. She had to wake up in 2 hours for her own job. He did not want to disturb her. Finally, Min-jun got up. He moved quietly to the small kitchen table. He pulled out a notebook, one he had bought years ago but never used. He found a pencil, and he began to write, the equation first. He wrote it from memory, every symbol, every term. It appeared on the page exactly as it had appeared on Professor Chen's board. Min-jun's hand moved with certainty. Mathematics was a language he had once spoken fluently. It came back to him now like greeting an old friend. He began exploring the problem. Where would he start? How would he approach it? He thought back to his university days in Korea. He remembered a professor who had taught him an unusual technique. It was an old method, not commonly used anymore. Most modern mathematicians preferred computer-based approaches, but Min-jun did not have a computer. He only had his mind and his pencil and paper. He worked for an hour, then 2 hours. The sun rose outside the small kitchen window. Light filled the apartment. Sujin woke up and found him at the table, surrounded by papers covered in symbols. You didn't sleep? She asked, concerned. I couldn't, Min-jun said. He looked up at her. His eyes were tired but bright. Sujin, I saw something at work. A problem. A math problem. You're always seeing math problems there, she said gently. She had watched him struggle for years with the gap between who he was and who he had to be. This one is different, Min-jun said. This one is special. It's been unsolved for 20 years. The professor who owns it, he's famous. Smart people have tried to solve it, but no one has succeeded. Sujin sat down across from him. And you think you can solve it? Min-jun hesitated. It sounded crazy when said out loud. He was a janitor with half a college degree from another country. He had not studied mathematics formally in over 20 years. Who was he to think he could solve something that had defeated professors and graduate students? I don't know, he admitted. But I want to try. Just for myself. Not to show anyone. Just to see if I still have it. If I'm still the person I used to be. Sujin reached across the table and took his hand. Her hands were calloused too from years of sewing. They were both workers. They both knew what it meant to give up dreams for survival. Then try, she said. But promise me you won't let it hurt you. If you can't solve it, that's okay. It doesn't mean anything about who you are. Min-jun squeezed her hand. I promise, but he was lying and they both knew it. If he failed at this, it would hurt. It would confirm what he had feared for 20 years, that he had lost his gift. That the years of menial work had erased the brilliant student he had once been. Over the next 2 weeks, Min-jun lived 2 lives. During the day, he slept a little and worked on the equation. He filled notebook after notebook. He tried different approaches. He hit dead ends and started over. He barely ate. He lost weight. His eyes developed dark circles underneath. At night, he went to work and cleaned. But now he cleaned Professor Chen's office with extra care. He spent more time there than necessary. He studied the equation on the board. He looked at the notes and papers scattered on the desk. He was searching for clues about how others had approached the problem. One night, he found something interesting. In the trash can, there was a crumpled paper. It was a letter from another professor at a different university. Minjun smoothed it out and read it. The professor had attempted a solution using a technique called spectral analysis. He had failed, but his approach was clever. Minjun took the paper home with him. He knew he should not. It was probably confidential. But he told himself he would return it. He just needed to study it first. The letter gave him ideas. He saw where the other professor had gone wrong. There was a small assumption in the third step that was not quite right. If you corrected that assumption, the whole approach might work. Minjun worked feverishly. He filled 20 pages with calculations. He checked and rechecked his work. And slowly, incredibly, the problem began to crack open. He found a path through the complexity. Not the whole solution yet, but a real path, one that others had not seen. His heart pounded as he worked. This was the feeling he had missed for 20 years. The joy of discovery. The moment when chaos becomes order. When confusion becomes clarity. This was why he had loved mathematics. Not because he was good at it, but because it made him feel alive. 3 weeks after first seeing the problem, Minjun believed he had something. Not a complete solution, but a major breakthrough. He had pages and pages of work. He had checked it dozens of times. He could not find any mistakes, but doubt crept in. He was tired. He had been working obsessively. Maybe he had made an error he could not see. Maybe his solution was wrong and he was fooling himself. He needed someone else to check it. But who could he ask? He knew no mathematicians. He had no colleagues in this field. There was only one option. The person whose office he cleaned every night. The person whose blackboard held the original problem. The person who would never take him seriously if he just walked up and claimed to have solved a 20-year-old equation. Professor David Chen Minjun sat at his kitchen table at 4 a.m., staring at his notebooks. His hands trembled. He felt sick with fear and excitement. He had to make a decision. Stay silent and safe or risk everything by speaking up. Outside, the city began to wake. Cars started passing on the street. The sky lightened from black to gray. A new day was beginning. Minjun made his choice. He would tell someone. Not directly, not yet. He was too afraid of being wrong, of being laughed at. But he would put his solution where Professor Chen could see it. Anonymously. If it was right, someone would notice. If it was wrong, no one would ever know it was his. That night at work, Minjun cleaned as usual. But he carried a small notebook in his pocket. His heart hammered as he pushed his cart toward the 4th floor. The building was empty, silent. Only the hum of fluorescent lights filled the air. He reached Professor Chen's office. The door was unlocked. The room was dark. Minjun turned on the light. The blackboard waited for him, covered with the equation that had haunted him for weeks. Minjun pulled out his notebook. His hands shook as he picked up a piece of chalk. This was it. The moment where he either changed his life or made a fool of himself. He began to write. Minjun's hand moved across the blackboard. The chalk made soft scratching sounds in the quiet office. He wrote slowly at first, then faster as his confidence grew. The symbols flowed from his memory onto the board. 3 weeks of work condensed into clean, clear steps. He started with the original equation. Then he wrote his approach. It was different from the standard methods. He had used an older technique that most modern mathematicians ignored. Something he had learned in Korea from a professor who studied ancient mathematical texts. Combined with modern calculus, it created a new path through the problem. Step by step, Minjun filled the board. His handwriting was neat and careful. He wanted whoever read this to understand exactly what he had done. Each line followed logically from the one before. No jumps, no gaps, just pure mathematical reasoning. An hour passed, then 2. Minjun's arm grew tired, but he kept writing. The solution took up the entire board. He had to erase Professor Chen's old notes to make room. For a moment he hesitated. Was he being disrespectful? But no, this was the answer Professor Chen had been searching for. He would understand. Finally, Minjun wrote the last line. The conclusion. The answer to a 20-year-old question. He stepped back and looked at the board. His heart pounded so hard he could hear it in his ears. There it was. His solution, complete. But was it correct? Minjun read through it again, checking each step. He found no errors. He had checked this solution 100 times at home. But what if he had missed something? What if there was a flaw he was too close to see? Doubt crashed over him like a wave. What had he done? He had written all over a famous professor's blackboard. He had been so arrogant. Who was he to think he could solve this? He was a janitor, a dropout, someone who cleaned toilets and emptied trash cans. Minjun grabbed the eraser. He would wipe it all away, pretend this never happened. Go back to his simple, safe life where no one expected anything from him. But his hand stopped. He stared at the board, at the beautiful logic written there, at the solution that had consumed him for weeks. Could he really erase it? Could he destroy this piece of himself? Before he could decide, Minjun heard something. Footsteps in the hallway. Someone was coming. At 3 a.m., the building should be empty except for him. His heart jumped into his throat. He looked around frantically. There was nowhere to hide. The footsteps grew louder. Minjun made a split-second decision. He dropped the eraser, turned off the light, and slipped behind the office door. It opened inward, creating a small space where he could hide. He pressed himself against the wall, barely breathing. The footsteps stopped outside the office. A key turned in the lock. The door opened and light from the hallway spilled in. Minjun could see through the crack between the door and the wall. It was Professor Chen. The professor wore sweatpants and an old jacket. His hair was messy. He looked like someone who had woken up in the middle of the night with an idea and rushed to campus. He flipped on the light and walked to his desk, muttering to himself, "If we approach the boundary conditions from a different angle." No, that won't work either. Professor Chen sat down and opened a notebook. He began scribbling. Minjun stood frozen behind the door, terrified. If Professor Chen turned around, he would see the new writing on the board. If he discovered Minjun hiding, there would be questions Minjun could not answer. Minutes passed. 5, 10. Professor Chen kept writing in his notebook, completely absorbed. Minjun's legs began to ache from standing so still. His nose itched, but he did not dare move to scratch it. Then Professor Chen sighed and stood up. He stretched his arms over his head. He started to turn toward the door, toward Minjun's hiding spot. Minjun held his breath. This was it. He would be discovered. But Professor Chen's eyes caught on the blackboard. He stopped mid-turn. His arms dropped to his sides. He stared at the board like he was seeing a ghost. "What?" Professor Chen whispered. He walked slowly to the board. His hand reached out and touched the chalk symbols like he needed to confirm they were real. His eyes moved across the lines, reading, understanding. His expression changed from confusion to shock to something like wonder. "No," Professor Chen breathed. "This can't be." He grabbed his notebook and began checking the solution against his own work. His hands shook as he flipped through pages. He pulled books off his shelf, comparing formulas. He paced back and forth, reading the board over and over. Minjun watched through the crack in the door. He saw the exact moment when Professor Chen realized what he was looking at. The professor's face went pale. His mouth opened. He staggered backward and sat down hard in his desk chair. "It's right," Professor Chen said to the empty room. "Oh my God, it's actually right." The professor grabbed his phone. He dialed a number. Someone answered, their voice groggy with sleep. "Martin? Martin, wake up. I need you to wake up right now." A pause. A mumbled response from the other end. "I don't care what time it is. Someone solved it. The Walsh equation. Someone solved it. No, I'm not drunk. I'm in my office. I'm looking at it right now. The complete solution is on my blackboard." The voice on the other end got louder. Minjun could not make out words, but he could hear the excitement. "I don't know who wrote it. That's what I'm trying to tell you. I came in to work on something else, and it was just here. Someone must have... I don't know. Come to campus now. We need to verify this. If this is real, Martin, if this is actually real..." Professor Chen's voice broke. Minjun saw tears running down the professor's face. The older man covered his mouth with his hand. He was crying and laughing at the same time. 20 years, Professor Chen said into the phone. 20 years and someone they just solved it. I have to find out who did this. I'll call the security office. Check the cameras. Someone was in this building tonight. Someone brilliant, Professor Chen ended the call. He made another. Then another. Minjun listened as the professor woke up colleagues, each conversation filled with the same disbelief and excitement. The words Walsh equation and complete solution were repeated over and over. After the fourth call, Professor Chen finally walked toward the door. Minjun's heart stopped, but the professor only closed the door and locked it from the inside. He did not want to be disturbed. He went back to the board and began copying the solution into his notebook, photographing each section with his phone. Minjun was trapped. He could not leave without being seen. His shift ended in 3 hours. Other workers would arrive in 5 hours. How long would Professor Chen stay? Minjun's legs screamed with pain. Sweat dripped down his back despite the cool air conditioning. An hour passed. Professor Chen worked at his desk, checking and rechecking the solution. He called more people. The office became a hub of activity, despite the early morning hour. The professor sent photos of the board to colleagues around the world. Responses came back immediately, even from different time zones. Everyone was too excited to care about sleep. The approach is unconventional, Professor Chen said during one call. That's what's so brilliant about it. They use Chebyshev's spectral methods combined with... Yes, exactly. No one thinks to use that anymore. But here, in this context, it's perfect. It's elegant. Whoever did this is not just smart. They're creative. They see patterns we missed. Finally, as dawn approached, Professor Chen stood up. He looked at the board one more time with an expression of deep respect. Then he left the office, carefully locking the door behind him. Minjun waited 5 full minutes before moving. His legs had gone numb. He nearly fell when he tried to step out from behind the door. He hobbled to the board and stared at what he had created, at what he had done. Professor Chen had called it brilliant, elegant. The solution was right. After 20 years, the problem was solved. And Minjun had solved it. He felt dizzy, lightheaded. This was real. This was actually happening. But alongside the joy, fear grew in his chest. Professor Chen wanted to find whoever wrote this. There would be an investigation, cameras, questions. Minjun grabbed his cleaning cart and rushed out of the office. He needed to finish his shift and leave before anyone else arrived. He needed to think. His whole body shook as he pushed the cart down the hallway. What had he done? He had wanted to solve the problem for himself, to prove he still had his gift. But he had not thought about what would come after. He had not imagined Professor Chen's reaction. The phone calls. The worldwide interest. This was bigger than he had understood. The Walsh equation was not just some random problem. It was famous in the mathematics community. Solving it meant something. People would want to know who did it. People would ask questions. And when they found out it was the night janitor, what then? Would they believe him? Or would they think he had cheated somehow? Copied someone else's work? He had no credentials, no degree. No proof that he was capable of this level of mathematics. Minjun finished his shift in a panic. He could barely focus on his work. He knocked over a trash can and spilled garbage across a hallway. His hands shook too much to hold the mop steady. By the time 6 a.m. came, he was a wreck. He punched out and walked to the bus stop. The sun was rising. The city was waking up. People headed to work carrying coffee cups and briefcases. Normal people living normal lives. Minjun stood among them, but he felt completely alone. At home, Sujin took one look at his face and knew something had happened. "What is it?" she asked. "What's wrong?" Minjun sat down at the kitchen table. He put his head in his hands. "I solved it," he said. "The equation. I wrote the solution on the professor's blackboard." "That's wonderful," Sujin said. But her smile faded when she saw he was not happy. "Isn't it wonderful?" "I don't know," Minjun said. "The professor came in while I was still there. I hid. I listened to him call people. He's trying to find out who solved it. Sujin, this is a big deal. A much bigger deal than I thought. And I'm scared. What if they find out it was me? What if they don't believe me? What if they think I'm a fraud?" Sujin sat down beside him. She took his hands in hers. "You're not a fraud. You solved a 20-year-old problem. That's real. That's true. But I'm nobody," Minjun said. His voice cracked. "I'm just a janitor. I clean toilets. I empty trash cans. Who's going to believe that I can do mathematics that professors can't do? Anyone who looks at your solution, Sujin said firmly. The math speaks for itself. Doesn't it? Minjun wanted to believe her. But the fear was too strong. He had spent 20 years being invisible, being dismissed, being treated as less than because of his job. How could he suddenly step forward and claim to be brilliant? It seemed impossible. I need to sleep, he said. I can't think about this now. But when he lay down in bed, sleep would not come. His mind spun in circles. One thought kept returning. His life was about to change. For better or worse, nothing would ever be the same again. The secret was out. And there was no taking it back. The mathematics department at Westbridge University exploded with activity the next day. By 8 a.m., 6 professors crowded into David Chen's office, staring at the blackboard like it was a holy relic. By noon, the department chair had called an emergency meeting. By evening, news had spread across the academic world. Someone had solved the Walsh equation. After 20 years of failed attempts, the answer had appeared overnight like magic. Professor Chen stood at the front of the conference room. 20 faculty members and graduate students packed the space. Everyone wanted to see the solution, to understand how it was done. I verified the work, Professor Chen said. His voice was hoarse from lack of sleep and too much talking. I've had colleagues at MIT, Berkeley, and Oxford check it as well. The solution is correct. Completely correct. It's not just right, it's beautiful. Efficient. The person who wrote this has a deep understanding of both classical and modern techniques. But who is it? Asked Professor Sarah Martinez, who taught topology. How did they get into your office? That's what we're trying to determine, Professor Chen said. He pulled up a laptop and projected images onto the screen. Security footage shows that 3 people were in the building last night. 2 graduate students working in the computer lab until 11 p.m. And our night janitor, Minjun Park, who was here from 10 p.m. until 6 a.m. Minjun's employee photo appeared on the screen, grainy and unflattering, taken years ago when he was first hired. He stared at the camera with the uncomfortable expression of someone not used to being photographed. The janitor? Someone asked, confused. Why would the janitor be relevant? He has access to all the offices, Professor Chen explained. He was on the 4th floor around the time I estimate this was written. I'm thinking maybe he saw someone, a graduate student we don't know about, or a visiting researcher who was working late. The idea that Minjun himself might have written it did not occur to anyone. It seemed impossible. Janitors cleaned. They did not solve problems that stumped the world's best mathematicians. We should interview him, suggested Dr. James Morrison, a young professor who specialized in differential equations, and check if any visitors signed in. Review more camera footage, Professor Chen nodded. I've already requested footage from all entrances. The security office is compiling it now. As for interviewing Mr. Park, I'll speak with him during his next shift. He seems like a quiet man. I've passed him in the hallways for years but never really talked to him. The meeting continued for another hour. Theories flew. Maybe it was a former student playing a prank. Maybe someone had hacked into Professor Chen's computer and seen his notes. Maybe it was an anonymous gift from a colleague. No one suggested that the janitor, the man who cleaned their offices and took out their trash, might be capable of solving what they could not. That night, Minjun reported for work as usual. But everything felt different. His hands trembled as he pushed his cleaning cart. Every sound made him jump. He expected someone to grab his shoulder at any moment and demand answers. When he reached the 4th floor, he saw light coming from Professor Chen's office. The door was open. Minjun's heart sank. He had hoped to avoid the professor for a few days, to figure out what to do, but there was no avoiding it now. He knocked softly on the open door. Professor Chen looked up from his desk. His eyes were red from exhaustion, but they brightened when he saw Minjun. Mr. Park, perfect timing. Please come in. Minjun's throat felt tight. I can come back later. If you're busy? No. I actually wanted to talk to you. Professor Chen gestured to a chair. Please sit. Minjun hesitated. He had never been invited to sit in this office. In any office. He was the janitor. He stood. He cleaned. He left. But he could not refuse without seeming suspicious. He sat on the edge of the chair, his back straight, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. I'm sorry to bother you during your work, Professor Chen said. He seemed genuinely apologetic. But I need to ask you some questions. Were you working on this floor 2 nights ago? Thursday night into Friday morning? Yes, Minjun said. His voice came out rough. He cleared his throat. Yes, sir. I work here every night. Did you see anyone unusual? Someone who doesn't normally work here? Maybe someone you didn't recognize? Minjun's mind raced. This was his chance. He could lie. Say he saw someone. Create a phantom mathematician that would take credit for his work. Or he could tell the truth. Admit what he had done, but his courage failed him. No, sir. I saw no one. The building was empty except for me. Professor Chen frowned. You're certain? You cleaned this office that night? Yes, sir. I clean your office every night. And you didn't notice anything unusual? Nothing different? Minjun thought about the equation on the blackboard. About the hours he had spent writing it. About hiding behind the door while Professor Chen made phone calls. No, sir. Nothing unusual. Professor Chen studied him for a long moment. Minjun forced himself to meet the professor's eyes. To not look away like a guilty person would, okay? Professor Chen finally said. Thank you, Mr. Park. If you remember anything, please let me know. This is very important. Someone solved a problem that's been unsolved for 20 years. Whoever did it is extremely talented. I'd like to thank them. Recognize their achievement. I understand, Minjun said. He stood up quickly. I should continue my work, of course. Thank you for your time. Minjun left the office. His legs felt weak. He had lied to Professor Chen's face. The shame of it burned in his chest. But what choice did he have? He could not just say, actually, I solved it. Me, the janitor. It would sound insane. Over the next week, the investigation continued. Security footage was reviewed. Every person who had building access was interviewed. The graduate students were questioned. Visiting scholars were tracked down. But no one admitted to writing the solution. No one seemed to know anything. The mystery deepened. News spread beyond Westbridge University. Mathematics websites and forums discussed it. Some people thought it was a hoax. Others believed it was real but argued about where the solution came from. The story even made it into a few newspapers. Anonymous genius solves decades-old math problem. Professor Chen became almost obsessed with finding the author. He studied the handwriting on his blackboard before it was erased. He analyzed the solution's approach, looking for clues about who might think that way. He consulted with professors from around the world. The technique is unusual, Professor Chen told his colleagues. The person used older methods combined with new ideas. It's not how we teach students to approach these problems today. This suggests someone older, someone educated in a different era or a different country. But who? Where are they? Minjun watched this all unfold from his position of invisibility. He cleaned offices where professors discussed the mystery. He overheard graduate students speculating. He saw Professor Chen's frustration growing as days passed with no answers. And Minjun said nothing. At home, the secret ate at him. He could not focus. He barely slept. Sujin watched him with worried eyes but did not push. She understood he needed to make this decision himself. 2 weeks after writing the solution, Minjun was cleaning Professor Chen's office again. The professor was there, working late as usual. They had fallen into a new pattern. Minjun would clean quietly while Professor Chen worked. Sometimes the professor would talk almost to himself. Whoever solved this has changed my life, Professor Chen said that night. He was staring at his computer screen, reading emails from colleagues. I've been contacted by researchers from 15 countries. Everyone wants to know who did it, how they did it. I've been invited to give talks, to write papers, all based on someone else's work. And I can't even thank them. Minjun emptied the trash can. He said nothing. It's frustrating, Professor Chen continued. I've dedicated years to this problem. Now it's solved and I don't know who to credit. I don't know who to shake hands with and say you did it. You succeeded where everyone else failed. The professor turned in his chair to face Minjun. Do you know what the worst part is, Mr. Park? The worst part is thinking that maybe this person is afraid. Maybe they have a reason for staying anonymous. Maybe they think no one will believe them. Or maybe they don't understand how important this is, how this solution will help people. Minjun's hands froze on the trash can. Professor Chen's words hit him like physical blows. Each one was true. He was afraid. He did think no one would believe him. He had not fully understood the importance. I wish I could tell them, Professor Chen said softly, that it doesn't matter who they are. It doesn't matter what their background is or what job they have or whether they have a PhD. The mathematics speaks for itself. If they did this work, they deserve recognition. They deserve to be heard. Min-jun set down the trash can. His heart pounded. This was the moment. He could speak. He could end this mystery. Professor Chen was practically begging the anonymous solver to come forward. But fear held his tongue. What if Professor Chen was just being nice? What if, when faced with the reality that his janitor had solved the Walsh equation, he reacted with disbelief? With suspicion? What if he accused Min-jun of cheating somehow? I should finish my work, Min-jun said quietly. Professor Chen sighed. Of course. I'm sorry for keeping you. I needed to say that out loud. In case the person who did this ever hears it somehow. Min-jun nodded and left the office. In the hallway, he leaned against the wall. His chest felt tight. He could barely breathe. That night, Min-jun made a decision. He could not come forward directly, not yet. But he could prove himself in a different way. He could show that it was not luck. That he truly understood advanced mathematics. Over the next week, Min-jun paid careful attention to the problems left on blackboards throughout the building. He found a particularly difficult proof in classroom 403. A graduate student had been working on it, with multiple failed attempts visible in different colored chalk. Late one night, Min-jun added to the proof. Not the complete solution, just a hint, a suggestion for a different approach. He wrote it in the same handwriting he had used for the Walsh equation. The next day, the graduate student found the hint. She followed it and solved the problem. She told her advisor, who was amazed at her breakthrough. But the student knew she had not done it alone. She knew someone had helped her. Word spread. The mysterious mathematician had struck again. Professor Chen heard about it. He rushed to classroom 403 to see the handwriting. It matched. The same person who had solved the Walsh equation was still in the building. Still helping. Still anonymous, the professor's determination grew. He started staying later at night. Checking offices. Walking hallways. He was trying to catch the phantom mathematician in the act. And Min-jun, realizing he had made a mistake by writing again, tried to become even more invisible. He cleaned faster. He avoided Professor Chen. He left no more hints on any blackboards, but it was too late. The hunt was on. And Professor Chen was not the kind of man who gave up easily. He had spent 20 years working on the Walsh equation. He would spend however long it took to find the person who had solved it. The question was, would Min-jun's courage arrive before Professor Chen's persistence paid off? Would he step forward on his own terms? Or would he be discovered against his will? Time was running out for him to decide. Professor Chen could not sleep. It was 2 a.m. on a Tuesday night, 3 weeks after the Walsh equation had been solved. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, his mind racing through possibilities. The mysterious mathematician was still out there. Still anonymous. Still unsolved like a human equation. He threw off the covers and got dressed. His wife stirred beside him. David, where are you going? Campus, he said. I need to try something. She sighed but did not argue. After 30 years of marriage, she knew better than to fight his obsessions. Professor Chen drove through the empty streets to Westbridge University. He parked in the faculty lot and walked to the mathematics building. The night was cold and clear. Stars filled the sky above. He let himself into the building with his key. The hallways were dark except for emergency lighting. His footsteps echoed. He climbed the stairs to the 4th floor and entered his office. For the next hour, Professor Chen worked at his blackboard. But he was not solving problems. He was setting a trap. A mathematical trap. He wrote out a complex differential equation, one he had been working on for his own research. But in the 3rd step, he deliberately made an error. A subtle mistake that most people would miss. Only someone with a deep understanding would catch it. Then he added a note at the bottom. Stuck here. Not sure where I went wrong. Professor Chen stepped back and looked at his work. If the mysterious mathematician was as compulsive as he suspected, as obsessed with mathematics as Professor Chen himself was, they would not be able to resist. They would see the error. And they would fix it. The professor left his office and walked down the hall. He found a storage closet with a small window that looked back toward his office. He wedged the door open slightly and settled in to wait. An hour passed. Then another. Professor Chen's legs cramped. His back ached. He began to think this was a stupid plan. The mysterious mathematician might not come tonight, might never come again, might have been a one-time visitor who was long gone. But then he heard it. The soft squeak of wheels. A cleaning cart moving down the hallway. Minjun appeared, pushing his cart. He looked tired, older than his 45 years. He stopped at Professor Chen's office and unlocked the door. The light clicked on. Professor Chen watched through the small window. He saw Minjun enter the office, saw him begin his usual routine, emptying the trash, dusting the desk, normal janitor things. But then Minjun turned to the blackboard. He froze, his eyes scanned the equation. Professor Chen could see the exact moment when Minjun spotted the error. The janitor's face changed. His tired expression became alert, focused. Minjun walked closer to the board. His hand reached out and touched the chalk symbols. His lips moved slightly, working through the problem silently. He shook his head at the error, like he was disappointed someone had made such a mistake. Then Minjun did something that made Professor Chen's breath catch. He picked up a piece of chalk. His hand hovered over the board. The internal struggle was visible on his face. Should he? Shouldn't he? Finally, Minjun wrote, just one line. A correction to the error. A suggestion for the right approach. The same handwriting. The same style. The same brilliance. Professor Chen stepped out of the storage closet. His footsteps were loud in the quiet hallway. Minjun spun around, the chalk still in his hand. His face went pale. He looked like someone caught stealing. Mr. Park, Professor Chen said gently. It's you. Minjun dropped the chalk. It clattered on the floor. I was just... You were correcting my deliberate error, Professor Chen said. He walked into the office. An error I put there specifically to find you. Because I knew you couldn't help yourself, just like you couldn't help solving the Walsh equation. Minjun backed away until he hit the blackboard. There was nowhere to go, nowhere to hide. 20 years of invisibility shattered in an instant. I'm sorry, Minjun said. His voice shook. I shouldn't have touched your work. I'll clean it off. Stop, Professor Chen said. He held up his hand. Please just stop. I'm not angry. I'm amazed, Mr. Park. Did you solve the Walsh equation? Minjun wanted to lie, wanted to deny it. But he was so tired of hiding, so tired of being afraid. He nodded slowly. Yes, he whispered. It was me. Professor Chen sat down in his desk chair. He looked at Minjun with an expression that was hard to read. Shock, confusion, wonder. How? Professor Chen asked. I've walked past you for years. I've said hello maybe a dozen times. I never imagined. Why would you? Minjun said bitterly. I'm the janitor. I clean toilets. I'm nobody. You're someone who solved a 20-year-old problem that defeated the best mathematicians in the world, Professor Chen said. His voice rose slightly. That makes you very much somebody, but how? Where did you learn this level of mathematics? The whole story came tumbling out. Minjun could not stop himself. 20 years of silence broke like a dam. He told Professor Chen about Seoul National University, about dropping out to care for his dying father, about coming to America with hopes and dreams that died slowly over 2 decades, about loving mathematics so much that he read equations while cleaning, about teaching himself from discarded textbooks. Professor Chen listened without interrupting. When Minjun finished, the professor's eyes were wet. I'm sorry, Professor Chen said. I'm so sorry that happened to you. That you've been here all this time with this gift and no one saw it. That I didn't see it. Why would you? Minjun asked again. People don't see janitors. We're invisible. Well, I see you now, Professor Chen said firmly. He stood up. And I need to know something. Can you prove it? That you solved the Walsh equation?
Do you have your work?
Your notes? Fear flashed through Minjun again. You don't believe me. I believe you, Professor Chen said. But others won't, not without proof. You need to show them your process, how you arrived at the solution. The mathematical community will demand evidence. Minjun thought of his notebooks at home. Pages and pages of calculations. Weeks of work documented in his own hand. I have everything. Every step. Every calculation. Can you bring them tomorrow? Tonight, I mean. Can you bring them tonight? I can bring them on my next shift. Tomorrow night. Professor Chen shook his head. No, I mean now. Go home, get your notebooks, and come back. Please, I know it's asking a lot, but this is important. This is your life we're talking about. Your future? Minjun hesitated. His shift was not over. He had rooms left to clean. But Professor Chen was right. This was more important than mopping floors. Okay, Minjun said. I'll go get them. Thank you. I'll wait here. Take your time. And Mr. Park? Thank you. For solving it. For proving that Professor Walsh was right. That an answer existed, Minjun nodded and left. He rode the bus home in a daze. The city was still dark. A few hours until sunrise. He let himself into his apartment quietly, trying not to wake Soo-jin. But she was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table in her robe. What happened? She asked immediately. It's only 4 a.m., you're never home this early. He found me, Minjun said. Professor Chen, he knows I solved it. Soo-jin stood up. And he wants proof. My notebooks, everything. Minjun pulled them from where he kept them hidden in a cupboard. 15 notebooks filled with his work. His life in mathematics documented page by page. Soo-jin hugged him tight. This is good. This is what we wanted, right? I don't know what I wanted, Minjun admitted. But it's happening now. There's no going back. He rode the bus back to campus, clutching his notebooks like precious cargo. Professor Chen was waiting in his office, 2 cups of coffee on his desk. Thank you for coming back, the professor said. He handed Minjun one of the cups. Show me. For the next 3 hours, Minjun walked Professor Chen through his solution. Page by page, step by step. He explained his reasoning. Where he got his ideas. Why he chose his particular approach. Professor Chen followed along, asking questions, nodding, occasionally gasping at particularly elegant moves. The sun rose outside the window. The building began to wake up. Other professors arrived for work. Graduate students filled the hallways. Professor Chen was oblivious to it all. He was completely absorbed in Minjun's work. When they finally finished, he sat back in his chair and looked at Minjun with something like awe. This is extraordinary, Professor Chen said. Not just the solution. The journey. The way you think, Mr. Park, you have a gift. A genuine, rare gift, and it's been wasted for 20 years. That ends today. What do you mean? Minjun asked. I mean, I'm going to fight for you, Professor Chen said. I'm going to make sure you get the recognition you deserve. The opportunities you deserve. You should be teaching, researching, contributing to the field, not cleaning floors. I don't have a degree, Minjun said. I never finished college. So we'll fix that, Professor Chen said as if it were simple. You'll finish your degree. Here at Westbridge. With a full scholarship. I'll make sure of it. Minjun could not breathe. That's impossible. I'm 45 years old. I have a job, a life. I can't just, why not? Professor Chen challenged. What's stopping you? Age, that's meaningless. Money, will find funding. Time, you've been studying on your own for 20 years. Doing it formally will be easier, not harder. But who will believe I can do this? Minjun asked. I'm a janitor who claims to have solved a famous problem. People will think I cheated, or that someone else did the work. Professor Chen picked up Minjun's notebooks. These are your proof. Your own handwriting. Your own process. No one can fake this level of understanding. Trust me, I've taught mathematics for 30 years. I know genuine talent when I see it. And you have it in abundance, Minjun wanted to believe him. Wanted to trust that maybe after all these years he could reclaim the life he had lost. But fear still gripped him. I need to talk to my wife, Minjun said. It's a lot. I need to think. Of course, Professor Chen said. Take all the time you need. But know this, I'm not giving up on you. Whether it takes a week or a year, I'm going to help you get where you should have been all along. Minjun gathered his notebooks and left. He walked through the mathematics building in a daze. Graduate students passed him in the hallway. A few looked at him curiously. The janitor leaving the famous professor's office. But they had no idea what had just happened. What was about to happen? At home, Soo-jin listened to everything. When Minjun finished, she cried. Not sad tears. Happy ones. You have to do it, she said. You have to try. We didn't come to America to just survive. We came here to live, to have chances. This is your chance, but what if I fail? Minjun asked. What if I can't do it? What if you solved a problem that no one else could solve? Soo-jin interrupted. You did that while working full-time, while being exhausted, while having no support. Imagine what you can do with time, with help, with people who believe in you. She was right. Minjun knew she was right. The fear was still there. the doubt. But underneath it, something else was growing. Hope, possibility, a future he had stopped dreaming about 20 years ago. Okay, Minjun said. I'll do it. I'll try, Sujin hugged him. You'll do more than try. You'll succeed. I know you will. That afternoon, Minjun called Professor Chen and told him his decision. The professor's joy was audible even over the phone. Good, Professor Chen said. Very good. Come to my office tomorrow. We have a lot of work to do. We need to verify your solution with other mathematicians. Apply for your admission to the university. Figure out funding. This is going to take time and effort, but we'll do it together. Together, Minjun repeated. The word felt strange. He had been alone for so long. Thank you, Professor Chen, for seeing me, for believing in me. Thank you for reminding me why I love mathematics, Professor Chen said, for showing me that genius can exist anywhere, that we should never assume we know who's capable of great things. You've taught me as much as I hope to teach you. Minjun hung up the phone. He looked around his small apartment, the life he had built out of necessity, out of survival. It had been enough. But now maybe, just maybe, he could have more. He could have what he had always dreamed of. A life lived in the world of numbers and symbols. A life where his mind could soar. A life where he was not invisible. The janitor who solved an impossible problem was about to become something more. And the journey was just beginning. The meeting room was full of skeptical faces. 8 members of Westbridge University's administration sat around a long table. The dean of the College of Arts and Sciences. The head of admissions. The financial aid director. The provost. They all looked at Professor Chen like he had lost his mind. You want us to give a full scholarship to a janitor, the dean said slowly. A 45-year-old janitor who dropped out of college 23 years ago. A janitor who solved the Walsh equation, Professor Chen corrected. A problem that has stumped the mathematical community for 2 decades. Yes, that's exactly what I'm asking. How do we know he actually solved it? Asked the admissions director. Maybe he copied it from somewhere. Maybe someone else did the work. Professor Chen had expected this. He opened his briefcase and pulled out Minjun's notebooks. He spread them across the table. Pages and pages of handwritten calculations. This is his process. Weeks of work. You can see how he developed the solution step by step. The handwriting matches what was written on my blackboard. The approach is unique. Nothing like this exists in any published paper or textbook. And I've spent hours questioning him. His understanding is genuine and deep. The provost picked up one of the notebooks. She flipped through it, her expression unreadable. Even if this is real, we have procedures, applications, requirements. We can't just admit someone because they're smart. Why not? Professor Chen asked. Isn't that exactly what we should do? Westbridge University prides itself on finding and nurturing talent. Well, here's extraordinary talent, right under our noses. We've been paying this man minimum wage to clean our toilets when he should be in our classrooms, teaching, researching, contributing to human knowledge. He has no undergraduate degree, the dean pointed out. We're a graduate institution. He would need to complete his bachelor's first. Then we admit him as an undergraduate, Professor Chen said. He can finish his degree here. I'll personally oversee his program. Make sure he gets the courses he needs. And who pays for this? The financial aid director asked. Full scholarships don't grow on trees. I'll find the money, Professor Chen said. Private donations, grants. I've already contacted 3 foundations that support non-traditional students. They're interested. Very interested. The story alone, a janitor solving one of mathematics' great problems, that's powerful. People will want to support this. The room fell silent. The administrators looked at each other. Finally, the provost spoke. This is highly irregular. Yes, Professor Chen agreed. But so is what Mr. Park has done. Irregular people require irregular solutions. If we do this, the dean said carefully, and he fails out, if he can't handle the coursework, or if this turns out to be some kind of fraud, it will be a massive embarrassment for the university. He won't fail, Professor Chen said with absolute conviction. I've seen his work. I've talked to him. This man has been teaching himself advanced mathematics for 20 years using thrown-away textbooks and sheer determination. Give him proper instruction, proper resources, and he'll excel. More silence. More exchanged glances. I need to meet him, the provost finally said. Before I approve anything, I need to speak with Mr. Park myself. Of course, Professor Chen said. He's waiting outside. The provost's eyebrows rose. You brought him to this meeting? I told him to wait in the hallway, in case you wanted to meet him. Was I wrong? The provost almost smiled. You're very sure of yourself, David. I'm sure of him, Professor Chen corrected. There's a difference, the provost stood. Send him in. Professor Chen walked to the door and opened it. Minjun sat on a bench in the hallway wearing his best clothes. A white button-down shirt Sujin had ironed carefully that morning. Black pants. Shoes he had polished until they shined. But his hands still showed years of hard work. Calluses. Rough skin. The hands of a janitor, not a professor. They want to meet you, Professor Chen said softly. Are you ready? Minjun's face was pale. No, but I'll do it anyway. He walked into the meeting room. 8 pairs of eyes studied him, judged him. Minjun fought the urge to lower his gaze, to become invisible again. Instead, he stood straight and met their eyes. Mr. Park, the provost said. Please sit down. Minjun sat. The chair felt too big, too official. He folded his hands on the table to stop them from shaking. Professor Chen tells us you solved the Walsh equation, the provost said. Can you explain to us in simple terms how you did it? This was the test. Minjun knew it. Could he talk about mathematics like a mathematician? Or would he fumble? Sound like a fraud? He took a deep breath. The Walsh equation has been approached many times using modern computational methods. Very complex, very computer-dependent. But I learned mathematics in Korea, where we studied older techniques, classical methods. I saw that if you combined these classical approaches with modern calculus, you could find a path through the problem that others had missed. Why didn't anyone else see this? The dean asked. Because they weren't looking, Minjun said simply. Sometimes being outside the system helps. I didn't know what wasn't supposed to work. So I tried things that others had dismissed as old-fashioned or inefficient. Sometimes the old ways are old because they're bad, but sometimes they're old because we forgot how good they are. The provost leaned forward. Why didn't you come forward immediately? Why stay anonymous? Minjun's throat tightened. This was harder to answer. Because I'm a janitor. Because I have no credentials, no degree. No reason for anyone to listen to me. I thought if I just put the solution out there, someone would see it and maybe use it. I didn't think about recognition or credit. I just wanted to solve it. For myself. To prove I still could. But you can't hide forever, the provost said. If you're as talented as Professor Chen says, the world needs to know. Needs to benefit from your gift. I know that now, Minjun said. I was afraid. I'm still afraid. But I'm here. I'm asking for a chance. Not because I deserve it, but because I can do the work. I can learn. I can contribute. If you'll let me, the room was quiet. Then the provost picked up one of Minjun's notebooks. She opened it to a random page and pointed to an equation. Explain this to me, she said. Minjun looked at the page. It was from his early work on the Walsh equation, a section where he had explored a failed approach. He explained it clearly, why he had tried this method, where it had broken down, what he had learned from the failure. The provost listened intently. When Minjun finished, she closed the notebook and looked at her colleagues. I think we should do it, she said. The dean started to object, but the provost held up her hand. This university was founded on the principle that talent exists everywhere, that our job is to find it and nurture it, regardless of where it comes from. Mr. Park is exactly the kind of student we should be supporting. Yes, it's irregular. Yes, it's risky. But if we're not willing to take risks on exceptional people, what are we here for? She turned to Minjun. If we offer you admission and a full scholarship, can you commit to this? It will be hard. You'll be older than your classmates. You'll face skepticism. People will watch you, waiting for you to fail. Can you handle that? Minjun thought about the last 20 years. The hard work. The exhaustion. The invisibility. All of it had prepared him for this. Yes, he said firmly. I can handle it. The provost nodded. Then welcome to Westbridge University, Mr. Park. Officially this time. As a student, not an employee, Minjun could not speak. Tears filled his eyes. After 23 years, he was going back to school. The news spread quickly. Local newspapers picked up the story first. Janitor solves impossible math problem, earns university scholarship. Then national news. Then International. Minjun's face appeared on websites and television screens around the world. The public loved the story. It was hope. Proof that dreams don't die, that it's never too late. Donations poured into Westbridge University, specifically for Minjun's scholarship fund. More money than he needed. The university created a new scholarship in his name for other non-traditional students. But not everyone was happy. Some mathematicians questioned whether Minjun's solution was really his own. They demanded more proof, more verification. Professor Chen spent months defending Minjun, showing the notebooks to colleagues, explaining the work. Eventually, even the skeptics had to admit the truth. The solution was genuine. Minjun Park, janitor and college dropout, had solved the Walsh equation. Minjun started classes that fall. He was 46 years old, sitting in classrooms with students half his age. It was awkward at first. The young students didn't know how to talk to him. Professors treated him like a curiosity. But Minjun kept his head down and worked. He had spent 20 years waiting for this chance. He would not waste it. He attended every class, did every assignment, studied harder than anyone else, and he excelled. His grades were perfect. His understanding deep. Within 2 semesters, he was taking graduate-level courses. Professors who had doubted him became his advocates. Students who had whispered about him started asking for his help. 3 years later, Minjun Park graduated with honors. His bachelor's degree finally complete. But he didn't stop there. He continued directly into a PhD program, focusing on differential equations and fluid dynamics. His dissertation expanded on his solution to the Walsh equation, opening up entire new areas of research. During those years, Sujin watched her husband transform. Not just his career, but his spirit. The man who had been invisible for so long now stood in front of classrooms teaching. The man who had been afraid to speak now gave lectures at international conferences. The man who had cleaned floors now had graduate students asking to work with him. 5 years after that meeting in the administration building, Dr. Minjun Park stood in front of his own classroom. He was now an assistant professor at Westbridge University, the very building where he had once pushed a cleaning cart. His students didn't know about his past at first. He looked like any other professor. But eventually word would get around. New students would hear the story. The janitor who became a professor. The dropout who earned a PhD. The man who refused to let circumstances define his destiny. Minjun always told his students the same thing on the first day of class. Mathematics doesn't care who you are. It doesn't care about your background or your job or how much money you have. Mathematics only cares if you're willing to think, to question, to persist when things are hard. That's all it takes, that and courage. One evening, 7 years after solving the Walsh equation, Minjun worked late in his office. It was the same office that had belonged to Professor Chen. His mentor had retired the previous year, insisting that Minjun take over the space. "You deserve it more than anyone," Professor Chen had said. "And besides, I like the symmetry. You used to clean this office. Now you work in it. That's poetry." Minjun sat at the desk reviewing a paper submitted by one of his graduate students. A soft knock interrupted him. He looked up to see a young man standing in the doorway. He wore a maintenance uniform and carried a mop. "Sorry to bother you, Professor," the young man said. "I can come back later." No, Minjun said. "Come in, please. What's your name?" "Carlos," the young man said. He entered shyly, keeping his eyes down. Minjun watched him work, saw how Carlos's eyes drifted to the blackboard, to the equations written there, saw the flash of interest before Carlos caught himself and looked away. "Do you like mathematics, Carlos?" Minjun asked. Carlos froze. I used to. In high school. But I had to work. Family stuff. I never finished college." Minjun smiled. He had heard this story before. He had lived this story. "What if I told you," Minjun said softly, "that it's not too late, that you could still finish school, still study mathematics, still have the life you dreamed about?" Carlos laughed bitterly. "With respect, Professor, that's not realistic. I'm 28 years old. I work full-time. I have bills. Dreams are for rich kids." "I was 45 when I went back to school," Minjun said. "I was a janitor, just like you. I had dropped out of college 23 years earlier. I thought my chance was gone forever." Carlos stared at him. "You're that professor, the one they tell stories about." "The janitor who—" He stopped, embarrassed. Who solved an equation and got a scholarship, Min-jun finished. Yes, that's me. And I'm telling you that if I could do it, you can too. You're 28. You have time. You have potential. You just need someone to believe in you. He pulled out a piece of paper and wrote down his email address. Take this. Think about what I said. If you're interested, email me. I know programs, scholarships, ways to make it work. Don't let fear stop you from becoming who you're meant to be. Carlos took the paper with shaking hands. Why would you help me? You don't even know me. Because someone helped me, Min-jun said simply. Professor Chen saw something in me when I couldn't see it in myself. Now it's my turn to pass that forward. To see potential where others see only a janitor. Carlos left, but Min-jun knew he would email. He knew because he understood that hunger, that yearning for something more, that dream that refuses to die no matter how many years pass. Min-jun turned back to his desk. Through the window, he could see the campus. Students walked between buildings carrying books and laptops, living the life he had once thought impossible for himself. He thought about the Walsh equation, about the night he had first seen it on Professor Chen's blackboard. That problem had changed everything. It had given him back himself, his identity, his future. But more than that, it had taught him something important. That genius doesn't have a dress code. That brilliance can push him up or wear a suit. That potential exists everywhere, in everyone, waiting for the right moment to emerge. Min-jun picked up a piece of chalk and walked to his blackboard. He wrote out a new problem for his students. Something challenging, something that would make them think and struggle and persist, because that's what mathematics teaches us. Not just how to solve equations, but how to face impossible things with courage. How to keep trying when others give up. How to believe in solutions even when we can't see them yet. Min-jun set down the chalk and smiled. The janitor was long gone. But the mathematician had been there all along, just waiting for someone to notice, waiting for a chance, waiting for a problem impossible enough to demand his return. And when that chance came, he had been ready. Not because he was special or lucky or destined for greatness, but because he had never stopped being who he truly was. Even when the world couldn't see it, even when he almost stopped seeing it himself, the equation had found him. Or maybe he had found it. Either way, both had been solved. And in solving them, Min-jun Park had proven something that no equation ever could, that it's never too late. That dreams deferred are not dreams denied. That the human spirit, like mathematics itself, contains infinite possibility. All you have to do is believe, and then begin.